Hello, everybody. Well, it's now 1:15, and we'll make a start for our last panel session of TechFest. This one's focusing on digital ethics and inclusion. My name's Nikki Moore. I am the strategic lead for continuing professional development at the International Centre for Guidance Studies at the University of Derby, and I also am a director for the Career Development Institute, where my focus is around the digital strategy. So it's a great pleasure to be here today to see this wonderful conference as it's unfolded, and to know that technology is taking leaps forward in the career development sector. So we have got some wonderful speakers this afternoon, but before I welcome them, I just want to give you some ideas for how we are going to work today. So the first thing is, please make sure that your microphones are muted, and this will make sure that all the speakers have the best chance of doing their good work without any interruption from other people's microphones. We will have a Q&A session at the end of the speakers, and it would be really a great help if you could put your questions into the chat facility as we go along. I know the speakers will try and address some of those, but we will retain some for the conversation at the end. So without further ado, I'd just like to welcome our first speaker, who will introduce herself as she starts, but welcome to Jo. I'm going to stop sharing my slides, Jo, so you can start yours. Okay. And you need to turn your microphone on, Jo.
Okay, so you can hear me okay?
Fantastic, yes. So welcome to the panel, and off you go. I'll turn my microphone off.
Okay, so Nikki, just to let you know, I had some technical issues, so I've got a full screen of my presentation. So if there are any questions that come up, would you just throw them at me or let me know so that I can answer them?
Yes, no problem.
Thank you very much. Okay, so hello everybody. Lovely to be here and to join you all at this first CDI TechFest. And you may be wondering why she put that slide up at the beginning of this presentation. So for me, there's just that moment to just get you to have a think. As career professionals in whichever professional, whichever area of careers you're in, I want you to have a think back or a reflection on a moment when you've helped to ignite someone's passion, when you've helped them to shape their careers, have that light bulb moment, and to, oh, sorry, my slides are going through at the moment, and yeah, to really ignite that passion in somebody. As a life coach, that's incredibly important to me, to help somebody have that light bulb moment. And I'm sure as career professionals, it is for you. But how does it feel? It feels incredible, doesn't it? It feels just amazing. So as I said, I'm Jo Riches. I'm a life coach, a mentor, a global ambassador for the Women Tech Network. And when I'm not doing that, I also do some yoga teaching. I'm recently qualified as a yoga teacher. I started out as an IT professional over 25 years ago, more years than I really care to remember. So I'm not going to sort of like go too far into that. But yeah, I've worked in the IT space for over 25 years. I started out as an IT application specialist and worked my way through a number of companies up to a leadership role. And from there, I then set up my own IT consultancy, which I ran as an IT professional for 4 years. And then most recently, I've stepped into life coaching. So as an IT professional for over 25 years and a woman in that space, I have experienced firsthand the highs and lows, the bumps that you get along the way, and how as a woman, it's really challenging, how you can easily feel overlooked, not heard, not taken as seriously as your counterparts in IT, of feeling quashed in that space. I equally know the amazing feeling of getting to the point you want to in your career, and having that time as a leader, leading other people, inspiring and creating passion in others. And I wanted to take a moment just in that sort of space, thinking about my career, to think about one particular woman who really inspired me, saw my potential, believed in me, and helped me to really step forward in my career. And her name was Claire Myerson. She was our IT leader at a company I worked for some years ago. And when she started with us, I was not where I wanted to be in my career. And I took the opportunity when Claire first came along to just introduce myself. I took a brave step. I actually came into a meeting I wasn't even supposed to be part of, to introduce myself and share with her who I was, what I did, and what I felt I could bring to her as a leader. And it was through that conversation, through taking a brave step and through sharing what I believed I could do, that Claire saw that in me and then helped me to have the career that I then had in IT, and to help me stand tall and own my space. For me, that's the incredibly important bit. That's what this is all about, is about how we can inspire and help women to come into the tech space. So you may ask yourself, why am I telling you all this? I'm telling this because I wish I had opportunities like the ones I'm going to tell you about with the Women Tech Network and the other similar organisations that advocate women in tech. I wish that there had been those types of communities when I'd started out in my IT career, because I know they would have helped me, and they would have really helped to escalate my career, help me to find direction and move forward. So now I'm incredibly passionate through the work I do about helping women to understand that there are these opportunities, to see that there are communities like this, and to step forward. So there's incredible power in the Women Tech Network community and other communities that I'm sure the panelists here will talk about today as well. But for me, I'm going to focus on the Women Tech Network, with understanding that this is actually kind of representing other organisations that do the same thing. I'm also going to, actually, do you want to move the slide down, Joe? If you can see. Okay. Thank you very much. So yes, yeah. Okay. So yes, so today I'm going to talk about the Women Tech Network, who they are, what they do, and why women in the tech space need to be part of it. But intertwined in that, and I've already touched on this, in terms of community connection and communication are so important. If we're talking, when we talk about inclusion and diversity, this is incredibly important in this space. And also to think about how, the digital technology is, as you've seen today, we have an amazing platform called Hopin, and digital technology has helped us to really sort of connect over the last year or so. And from a technology space, we live in a technical era, and technology is an intrinsic part of our lives and will continue to be so as we move forward. So encouraging young women, women already in the workspace who are looking to move into that area, to do that is incredibly important. So my aim today is to raise your awareness of the Women Tech Network, the work they do, to promote these types of communities, what they do and why they're so important in the space of diversity and inclusion. To thread through that, as I said, the community connection and communication, easy to say sometimes other than others, why that's so important, and then why we need to be advocating this to those people we're working with, students, clients, colleagues and peers. So why is this so important to me? Well, I've mentioned my career and how I came to be at this point. And so, that speaks for itself, but I'm actually passionate about this because I'm passionate about inspiring women to lead with confidence, to stand tall in bare feet as I do today, and to own their space. And I do this through the work I do as a life coach, a mentor and a global ambassador. I want to see more women in the tech space to help us to move forwards, to readdress the stats that we see that show that, there aren't enough women coming through into this space, and then there aren't enough women here already. So let's to look at readdressing the stats and changing the message. And that's why I life coach women in this space. Joe, could you move to the next slide for me? I feel like Chris Whitty now. Next slide, please. Okay, so Women Tech Network. So I'm not sure how many of you might have already heard of the Women Tech Network, but I'm here today just to share some of the great work they do. So the Women Tech Network, how did they come about? So I'm going to introduce you to a lovely, incredibly inspiring woman called Anna Radulowski. Now, Anna Radulowski started out, well, she worked in the tech space. So if we go back a few years, Anna was working in the tech space and had started to observe that there really weren't enough women in that space. You know, she was one of them, but there just weren't enough women coming in or already there. It was very male dominated. And so we're through with this thought in mind, Anna started up an organisation called Coding Girls in 2017 with the idea of encouraging young women, either school age or older, into understanding what coding was all about and how it's a great way to step into the tech space and how many opportunities there are in that space. So it started out as a workshop for 16 girls. And from there, it's grown into an organisation that now has 5,000 plus members. And so at the start of 2020, Anna, as the founder of this organisation, with her partner, were planning a number of events across the world. I think they had over 50 events planned. And then, of course, what happens? COVID hits. So like many companies in that situation, they had to really think about what they were going to do. All of a sudden, all 50 plus events were cancelled. And these events were meant to bring women together, to encourage them into that tech space. And so there was this gap. Not only that, but Anna and her partner, who are the founders of the Women Tech Network, were in that state where they have a young child. They needed to pay bills. And so it was a case of, right, how can we turn crisis into opportunity? And so what came out of that was the sudden evolution of the Women Tech Network. And so Anna and her partner had this brave idea, this ambitious idea. How about we bring 100,000 women plus together into a space, an online space where we talk about technology. We share, you know, that mission of wanting to empower women into tech leadership, into development, professional growth, etc. And so the Women Tech Network was born. And I came to this last year. So I found out about the Women Tech Network sort of probably about March time, April time, the time that it was starting to be advertised. And I saw a golden opportunity to get involved and really advocate something amazing. And so I joined a team of global ambassadors whose mission it was to advocate the Women Tech Network, to talk about this amazing event that was happening in June, and to share the great work and get as many women involved as possible. So in June last year, over 140,000 women and men. So I think it's important to say that although it's called the Women Tech Network, this is not just for women, this is for men as well. And there were men attending, men that were global ambassadors. And I think, again, it's that thing of, if we talk about inclusivity and diversity, and certainly from my perspective, supporting and advocating women is not at the detriment of men. It's about being inclusive and creating collaborative environments. And so the Women Tech Network had that very thing in mind. So yes, they brought together over 140,000 women across 3 days. They had over 400,000 ambassadors. 181 countries were involved. So if we talk about diversity, the reach was enormous. All these women and men coming together in this one space, very different backgrounds, different ages, different experiences. And there were 500 plus speakers at this event. So I attended the event and heard from some incredible women and men talking about their journeys, the jobs they do, how they got into tech, and sharing their knowledge and experience. And it was just an incredible environment to be in. The great thing about it, it's so diverse. So you have women at student level, right the way through to CEOs of companies, both talking and attending. Women from all backgrounds, so it's not just technical roles. There were software engineers, product managers, data scientists, etc. But also women, a bit like myself, who come from a space of being in project management, business engagement, and leadership roles. And it was a safe space for women and men to come together and really understand what it is that's going on in the tech space and how we continue to empower women into that space. So how have they done since then? So since that event, the Women Tech Network have continued to advocate and promote women into the tech space. They have various things that happen. They have careers advice events, job opportunities, networking, fireside chats that occur on a regular basis with inspirational speakers. They have a global ambassador program, and they create inspirational posts and media activity as they go along. And the Women Tech Network is happening again this year. So I suppose one of the things to talk about here is that I am advocating this to you. I'm advocating this to my network, but something like the Women Tech Network is such an amazing space to encourage women who are either interested or in working in tech space, or even just have an idea that they might want to be there. It's an amazing, amazing space, and I truly advocate it as somewhere for women to come to. And what are the women saying about it that attend? So after the event last year, I had an incredible opportunity to speak to a young maths student, a woman from Morocco. I would never have got to meet this lovely woman had it not been for the Women Tech Network event. And we had a chat. She was looking for some help around her career and what direction to take. And so we chatted via Zoom for about half an hour. And out of that conversation, she stepped away with an idea of how she could link her passions and her desires into her career. And so for me, it was an incredible opportunity to connect with a woman I probably wouldn't otherwise have connected with, but also to just give her that light bulb moment, that inspiration that I talked about at the beginning of the session. So coming back to that, yeah, it's about that thing of igniting passion in young women into the tech space, really kind of helping to inspire and create that light bulb moment for women to help them achieve what they want and achieve their dreams. So I think I'm almost done actually, but I've got my next slide. So I get to this point, and I hope that, you know, through what I've shared with you, that you can see the benefit of such an organisation. As I said, there are other organisations, communities that do the same thing, but just how incredible the Women Tech Network is and how much work it's doing to address diversity and inclusion. And I leave you with something to consider, to maybe write in the comments box, to take away and think about, or even to come back and have, if you want to talk to me about this, I'd love to have a conversation with you, is what is one thing you can do to encourage more diversity and inclusion in the tech space? Is it around more positive messaging and conversation? Is it about raising awareness of the Women Tech Network and other similar organisations? Making women aware that it's not just about having to do coding. There are so many opportunities within the tech space within these organisations. And just focusing on the fact that technology is the future. So how can women get more involved? So as I said, I'm Jo Riches. I'm going to hand back to Nikki because I think I've just about talked myself out of time. You can find me on via LinkedIn, via my website, or at the details I've provided. And I would love to continue the conversation with you. So if there's something you'd like to chat to me about, then please do reach out to me. But I'd just like to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak, and I will hand back to Nikki now.
Thanks very much, Jo. That was excellent, and you've given us so much food for thought there. I can already see some questions appearing in the chat there. Jo, if you get a minute, you're more than welcome to try and answer some, but we'll bring those together at the end when everybody's had a chance to speak. But really great. Thanks so much for starting the panel for us.
Okay.
Well done. Thank you. So we're now going to go into the second presentation, which is by Debbie Forster. And Debbie will introduce herself and get her slides going in a second. But Debbie, thank you very much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say on the subject of diversity in technology. So thank you very much, and over to you.
Lovely. Thanks so much for having me here today. And it's interesting, I was thinking this morning that talking to an audience and thinking about careers advice. Now, I am going to go back farther than Joe. You'll hear from the accent. I might as well put that one to bed very quickly after I say a few sentences if I'm speaking to a British audience. The distraction quickly sets in of, what is that accent? And my American family think it sounds British. My British family think my British friends think it sounds a little bit Canadian, and the Canadians just shake their heads and they walk away. But the accent is something that is originally from the US, but been brewed here for 30 years. And back in the US, I can remember being in high school in the 80s. Yes, it was that far ago. And I did have a computer class. And I remember doing very well on some tests and having one interview with a career advisor. And in trying to figure out, I had no idea, like most 18-year-olds, what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to travel. I wanted to work with people. Beyond that, I wasn't sure. They said, you're very good at school. You have very good grades. You're very good about maths, etc. Do you want to be a lawyer? Or do you want to be a doctor? And I said, I don't want to be either. And they said, would you like to be a lawyer or a doctor? And I do remember saying, but what about these computers? And they just said, that's not really a job, Debbie. Now roll forward, I became a teacher. So when I stand and talk to you, sit and talk to you today, I'm someone who then spent decades working with young people. And one of the reasons I found myself in tech was not actually because I thought tech in and of itself was incredibly exciting. What I saw as an educator was that tech opened doors for my young people. Tech opened doors in their learning. And I also, because I worked with young people from challenging backgrounds, it opened doors into careers they might not normally have. So roll forward many years and coming back. And I was in education a long time ago. If anyone's of an age, you'll know that I remember my first encounter with British careers education was the Record of Achievement. If there's anyone on this call that remembers those maroon folders that very quickly gathered dust of both the young people and the educators. But I now work for the Tech Talent Charter, and the Tech Talent Charter in and of itself is really trying to solve a few problems. It started back in 2016, when someone approached a few of us who were doing things around tech and people, and I was working in an ed tech for young people that had 50% of our students were girls, and 50% of our experts who worked with our students from the tech industry were women. And if you know anything about the diversity in tech, that's not a stat you often hear. And so I found myself pulled more and more into these conversations about tech and diversity. So by the time the woman who wrote the charter, Sinead Bunting, in 2016, approached myself and a few other friends, my comment was, and there may have been a glass of wine involved when we were approached, if I have to go to one more roundtable event on why there's no women in tech, my head's going to explode. If I have to go to another company event to hear them reinventing another program that the other company around the corner is doing, I'm going to start telling the truth and get in all kinds of trouble. Let's do something different. And from that, the Tech Talent Charter began. We're a not-for-profit organization, and our goal is to move the dial and to ensure that the tech industry as a whole represents the society. All right, it's important for us to see that tech, which is for everyone, is built by everyone. And we began that journey, and I'll talk in a few minutes, looking just at gender, but we knew always this had to be about inclusion and diversity as a whole, that we had to consider lenses like ethnicity, LGBTQ+, age, disability, neurodiversity. We needed to make sure that everyone felt they had a place and could belong within technology. And if you see from pictures from some of our events back when the world allowed us to be in the same room, this was about not bringing just women together. This was bringing about everyone together within that ecosystem. So that is employers, both men and women. It was bringing together groups that work with underrepresented groups, people like Joe. It was bringing together people who could be part of careers advice. So CDI is a member. This is bringing together everyone who wants to make sure that tech is open for business for everyone, and there's a place for everyone at the table. It is free to join, and it focuses on the practical and the collaboration. So I'll tell you a little bit about that, but then I want to tell you in terms of you are out there talking to people about whether they might have a career in tech. And so there's some things that I'm going to draw your attention to, because as Joe says, there are a lot of people out there, a lot of organizations out there. That's good news. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to do everything. What you need to know is who you can click into, who you can refer to see that there are a growing number of companies. And it is a growing number of companies. I make no apologies. You hear people often say, well, I'm not going to preach to the choir. By golly, I preach to the choir. All right. The choir are companies who get that inclusion and diversity is not just a good thing to do. This is not just social justice. This is smart business. And therefore, they're getting together because they desperately want to find a more inclusive workforce. And the other thing to remember as a careers advisor, look, it's been an unbelievably broken, hard year. And a lot of people are finding themselves in careers, in sectors that are contracting, in industries that have a ticking clock on them. And young people have been particularly impacted and trying to know where there might be future jobs. The thing I would remind you, under lockdown, under COVID in the last year, the only sector beyond health and medical research that expanded was tech. And the thing to remember for tech, in the UK, there is not enough talent. They can't find enough people. So if we can help give the right information to people and help them see that there is a place for them at the table, there is a place for them within tech companies. And I can talk to you about companies who are going that extra mile. They're not asking for people to come in and change who they are and become like everyone else. This is about welcoming them to bring them whole selves into the workplace. So when we think about it, what's our primary focus? You remember what I said, I can't keep talking about the problem. I want to talk about practical solutions. So one of the things we do when companies join us, they make a pledge that they're going to share what works and what doesn't. That's really important. So, and they're not treating it like a trade secret. So you will hear organizations come together to share what they have figured out on how to get better at recruitment, how to get better at retention, how to develop retraining programs. We're about to do some work in just a month, kicking off work on how can you build better, more effective apprenticeship programs. And it's about sharing what doesn't work. You can hear companies talk about, this was our return to work policy, and here's how it was horrible and broken, and here's how we fixed it. So we have something called the Open Playbook of Best Practice that maps out for employers everything they can do from the horizontal, the verticals. So we would say culture, data, recruitment, retention, growth, retraining, but also increasingly the horizontals. How do I get better and be more inclusive for women? How could we develop better Black allyship programs? What do we do to try and recruit and retain people from challenging socioeconomic backgrounds? It's there in the playbook. We share a directory. Now we have a directory because one of the things we found was that nobody, including the government, knew who was doing what in the space. So we began mapping that. Our directory has over 500 initiatives on everything from volunteering in schools to apprenticeships to women's networks to consultants that can come in and help a company to become more inclusive. And that, again, free to use. And finally, we really firmly believe what's measured gets done. And so the one price that every company must pay to join the Tech Talent Charter is annually, they have to submit data to us. If they don't, I kick them out. And each year, of my 575 members, each year I have kicked out around 10 to 15% of members if they don't share the data. We use that data to create the last piece of our toolkit. So we anonymize it, we aggregate it, we have a report. We just launched ours at the end of February that you can download and look if you want to see the state of the nation amongst companies that are really moving forward. And I'll tell you a few things that we learned. It is about then benchmarking. So my companies can sit down to understand where are they ahead or behind for companies their size, their sector, their part of the country. And so this means we have a growing number of companies, and it's great. This year's report actually had, let's see, it represented 161,000 tech professionals within the workplace across sectors, which means that gives it the sort of statistical significance of the ONS data. So the sorts of things I'm going to talk to you about do have some resonance about what's happening in the country. Now, back when we started, we were 17 companies, all right? And peel back the curtain, we're still a startup behind the scenes. But now at 575 companies, now there's tiny little logos there, but do remember, I think the thing to remember when you're thinking from a careers advice perspective, when we talk about tech, we're talking about just about every company, and any company that didn't wake up before COVID that they needed digital talent woke up during COVID. So when I say we represent the ecosystem, yes, I have Salesforce and Microsoft and Cisco, but I have Sky TV, I have Lloyds Bank, I have Unilever, I have Cancer Research UK, I've got Domino's Pizza. I've got SMEs, startups, university. This is anyone who has a vested interest. So when we talk about our young people thinking about what they want to do, with tech, yes, you can make a lot of money, or you can travel, or you can use your skills for passions, for the environment, for cancer research, for homelessness. It's all there within that. So we bring them together, and the goal we do is connecting the dots. It's about collaborating and benchmarking. So as CDI is a signatory, they'll be able to share things with you about information. You'll be able to look at things like the directory so that you can see, you can find things to signpost for yourself. All right, well, what does this mean to you? Very quickly, we have the business case. So why is tech doing this? We've got a business case. We have the beginnings of moving the conversation forward. We're getting buy-in, and we have a roadmap for what works. So if you ever come across a company, or if young people want to understand why do companies want to do it, we know there's a business case. Diverse, inclusive teams are smart business. It improves your bottom line. It improves the innovation and creativity, and it makes you more attractive. So you can start advising young people as well. If they want to work for a company that is inclusive, there's companies out there. They don't just have to take the first thing that comes along. We've moved the conversation forward. Back in 2016, all we did talk about gender, but we promised to move forward. By 2019, our employers told us that they were ready to think much more widely. So we have done things in our hackathons and our work and our practical lunches to learn on things like ethnicity, on things like social mobility. We're just going to have a hackathon gathering best practice on social mobility in 3 weeks' time. We work with organizations to help them understand what's best practice in neurodiversity. And what we also saw this year is there is the shift finding. If all we do is talk about diversity, we're just running the risk of ticking boxes. We want to shift to talking about inclusion. But what I'm also seeing is that companies are starting to think about belonging, opportunity for all, equity, putting in structures that help people that have normally been excluded from these pathways and opportunities to bring them on board. And the good news is we're seeing some impact. So engineering roles, which is always, whenever I get the stats and they look better, I get people that say, ah, yes, Debbie, but that's not engineering, is it? That's not the computers. That's not the hardcore. We're seeing a leap. Now, this was under 2020. We saw a leap from 17 to 22%. Now, that's not 50%, but that's a good, healthy leap. It's also looking at across them that 25% of the technical roles are women. Now that's better than the norm. Remember, I've got the choir, but you can start seeing companies. We're hearing companies like Unilever that's getting up to 45% in their tech roles. We're also seeing what was very, very good. 58% of our companies said ethnicity was becoming a high priority. And really good, because like anybody, I was worried that under pandemic, under what was happening on COVID, that would suddenly get pushed to the back of the room. It's not. For a quarter of our companies, they actually said they were going to make it more of a priority, with 60% saying that it was going to stay at that priority level. So only 14% dialed it back a bit. And I think this is what's important as well, because it's all very well to say at the top, but what do we mean by managers? What are they going to say? Because that's who your clients are going to be talking to. What was really great to see is we're getting the buy-in. 73% of tech employees, and this was, we did a survey of middle managers, not of my members and not even the choir. This is the whole damn church and the atheists out there as well. Only 6% disapproved. 21% still undecided. 80% agreed or strongly agreed. All right. And 40% said, yep, they do work. Now it's important though, because I'm not naive. 1 in 5 felt they could be counterproductive. 22% still felt they have concerns about could they raise a D&I issue. That rose to 32% if they were from an ethnic group. But what's important to remember is for our signatories, we don't just gather to talk about the good news. We gather to talk about the challenges. And a lot of our work in 2021 is going to be looking at that, what we would call diplomacy. Diversity and inclusion, diplomacy. How do we start those tough conversations, help everyone feel, men and women, overrepresented groups, underrepresented groups, feel they have a voice in the room? Okay, so what does this mean for you? All right, we also know where we are on the pipeline. If we think from early inspiration all the way up to growth and information, we've been able to map what are the barriers that are keeping people from getting into tech. Now you'll see how important you are if you see that those first 3 boxes, careers information, is vitally important. And it's why we would see you as a very important part of this conversation. It is also about parents and media when they're younger, media and society as they get older. But this is something that we lean into, and it's why it's so important that we have the whole sector to working together in that respect. We know what works, all right? So it's no longer top secret. It's no longer people having to go back to square one and reinvent things. We know there is no single bullet, magic bullet that fixes it, but we do know the ingredients of how to make companies inclusive. The other thing that I think, and where I want to draw your attention, remember I said that what we do is we connect the dots. We don't reinvent the wheel. I also don't pretend at the charter that we're going to fix everything. This is too big a problem to focus for one organization or one initiative to be able to solve. So what I'd urge you is, if you want to figure out who's doing what in the space, if you want to hear what employers are doing in that respect, we're a great place to be. But 3 other organizations I want to draw your attention to. One of them is the Tech Talent Charter, which is focusing primarily on that under 18 and then going into the 18-year-olds around apprenticeship. So you will have heard earlier today with Ellie Yao and Fledglink. She's working, and Fledglink is working with Tech She Can on things like work experience and apprenticeships. So that younger age range, very, very important. Institute of Coding, you'll also hear about, and I'll talk about in more detail, working on universities, but reaching into schools for that inspiration piece. They've done a lot of great stuff that you can do. And Future.now. Future.now is helping companies to realize for their existing workforce, they need training, they need upskilling before they can even begin thinking about the retraining piece. So if you've not come across it before, please look at the Tech She Can Charter. You can see the website, and this slide deck will be shared with you after this. They are focusing on those root causes, and they're creating materials that can be used in the classroom by teachers, by outside speakers coming in. There are career talks, and what's lovely about it, it is around Tech We Can, because it's not just girls, it's looking at all people to look at this, but it is bringing to life, what does tech mean in the medical field? What does tech mean within music? What does tech mean within holiday celebration? There's great free bite-sized information that you can begin using, that teachers can use in the classroom, that you can pick up and use today. And it's free, and it's put together by employers, so you know it's rooted in that real information. Similarly, Institute of Coding, it's a national consortium of 35 universities who are working with 200 employers. They are completely rethinking, what do we mean about higher education, further education, and computing? And they're looking at how the courses are designed. So it's not just face-to-face, not just a 3-year program. They're looking at online programs. They're looking at part-time programs. They've also looked at the recruitment pieces. There's some fantastic campaigns that had great traction on social media, attracting young people in that. And if you have any doubt about that, just since they began 3 years ago, they've had 800,000 learners, and wait for it, 46% of were women on their online courses. All right, so in this world of change, it's a great opportunity, and there is a mix of free and paid for courses that you can look at. Then last but not least, what I would say that might be for use for you, we realize because so many of our companies were now looking at retraining, returning, other programs to get those alternate routes into tech, but women didn't always see themselves there. So on our website, you'll see a campaign that we ran last autumn called Doing It Anyway. We have 8 women from really different backgrounds, very, very intersectional, but telling the story of how they got into tech after school, after another career, after a motherhood break. So there's information, and then it links into our directory where people can see how they can get qualified. What are the courses that Institute of Coding offers? What are the training programs, or what are the companies that they could begin applying for as an alternate route into tech? So that's all from me, but really what I want you to know is, if you're looking for things that you could be sharing with your clients, with your students, with your teachers, there's a wealth of information, and there is a place for them at the table in the tech industry.
Right, thanks ever such a lot, Debbie. That was so interesting, and I have to say some really useful links there as well for resources that we can use as a sector to start engaging people in the discussion, young people in the discussion about careers in tech. So really fantastic. And I have to say, when I joined the CDI board and I was asked to take on the digital strategy, I thought, oh my goodness me, here I am, an older woman, how is this going to work? But I have to say it's been an absolute joy. And it's been a real journey of adventure, and I've really loved it. It's been super to find out about all of these new things. So you know, if I can do it, everybody can do it. And you know, it's, I think, a case often of kind of being a role model for people as well. So we need to be loud and proud about our use of technology. And yeah, so great. Thank you very much indeed. And I think there are some questions that I've collated. Did I hear you use the word hackathon? Did you use that word?
Hackathon.
Oh,
they're
hackathon.
happy when they do it. Although I might shift to that. So it's a hackathon. So what we do is we do shout outs, and people from across the sector who have expertise come together to gather all the great resources for us. So we are currently running a hackathon on social mobility, on apprenticeships, on digital diplomacy, and data policies. So if there's anyone that has that expertise, that team comes together. They work virtually in a hack way, in a tech way, to present. But I'm going to put in as an also known as. I'm going to use Happy-thon too.
I think so. There are people in the chat going, yeah, we love that term. So tech and happy in the same kind of same kind of sphere. So fantastic. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm going to ask our final panel speaker to turn on his camera and his mic. So this is Tom Staunton, one of my colleagues at ISEG. So I'm going to leave him to introduce himself. But Tom, are you all set to go?
Yeah, good to go.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'll hand over to you then. So thanks, Tom. Over you go.
Thanks, Nikki. My name's Tom Staunton. I work at the University of Derby with ISEGS, the International Centre for Guidance Studies, where I train career practitioners, both at level 7 and also on our career leaders programs. And I also do research. I'm writing a PhD about how students use social media as part of their career development at the moment. Do various bits of research around how career development and career guidance intersect with digital technology. Let me get my slides up. That's worked. My session today, I'm going to be looking at ethics for the digital careers professional. So I'm going to be looking at a series of sort of issues and questions for career professionals in how they use technology in their practice. That's kind of my background and my perspective about this this question of digital and inclusion is how can we as career professionals use technology in a way which is inclusive with the clients that we work with, and how can we be aware of the issues that they may face from an ethical point of view with their own use of digital technology as part of their careers. So for me, ethics, those often sort of discussed in quite a sort of quite an elaborate and quite a detailed view by people. I think often ethics comes down to a simple mantra of not wanting to do harm to other people. That sort of also like medical imagery of that, like the first thing that a doctor does when they sign up to become a medical professional is they say that I'm not going to do harm to other people, and I think that's a helpful way of thinking about any sort of issues to do with ethics. So how can we avoid doing harm in our practice as careers professionals, but also how can we open up opportunities for doing good in ways that maybe didn't exist before? I've got a number of sort of topics which we're going to talk through. But in that, we're going to sort of cut across thinking about how the tools that we use as careers professionals and how what the ethical issues are attached to the tools that we use, but also the tools that our clients may be using as part of their career development. So thinking about what opportunities are there to promote inclusion, to promote equity and equality, to move social justice forward, both in terms of the tools that career professionals use, but also the tools that the clients that we work with may be using for their careers as well. As ever with careers practice, I don't think there are particularly right, wrong answers to things. There aren't necessarily straightforward answers, but I just think there's a sense of that careers practices move forward not when we have better answers so much as when we have better questions. So in the next little section, I hope just to flag up some questions that we should be asking around digital careers practice from an ethics and inclusion perspective. The first of these is around enabling access. For careers practice to be effective, we need to make sure that people are able to access it, are able to engage with it themselves. And we've seen this as a really, particularly over the last 12 months during the pandemic, has a vital issue for education in general. But particularly from our perspective as careers professionals, what part does technology play in enabling access so people can receive the support that they need around their careers? Now, technology is well placed around this as an issue. Technology allows people to access things. None of us are sitting in the same room as each other today. We've got a session with over 100 people, and we're all sitting in our own rooms, going about our day-to-day lives. But we're able to come together and access this sort of content and access these opportunities to network with each other because of technology. I did research that I've been doing over the last 12 months. I've been seeing this particularly from the research I've been doing is from a HE perspective. I think it sort of maps out across the sector. But technology allows people to access support. It has allowed careers professionals to carry on offering career guidance appointments to people, despite the fact that they're not able to come into schools and colleges at the moment. It has allowed interesting and developing practice around employer engagement. As careers professionals has been able to get employers and other institutions involved in careers education despite the pandemic. And in many ways, that enabling access could be really exciting in that that we now have the opportunity there are opportunities around employer engagement where we don't necessarily have to go through all of the sort of rigmarole of getting somebody onto site. We can beam the people that we would really want to talk to our career clients in, potentially from the other side of the world. So technology enables access, and that can be really positive from an inclusion point of view, from an ethics point of view. Often people who come from disadvantaged backgrounds for whatever reason are held back because they don't come into contact with the people that they need to move their careers forward, whether that's professionals, whether that's role models, whether that's employers and recruiters. And technology gives us new opportunities to think about how we can make sure that the people who need support are able to access support. But the flip side to this is that though technology has allowed people to access stuff through the pandemic, it has also cut people out in various ways. Though we live in an increasingly digital society, there still exists a significant digital divide. Though that isn't always entirely between people who do have the internet and people who don't have the internet. It can also come into play around the forms of digital technology that people have access to themselves. People who may have worse Wi-Fi because they live in a rural area. People may have less access to devices because of the economic background they come from. Young people who may be supporting themselves through life and only have pay-as-you-go access to the internet rather than a subscription service. All of these issues mean that we need to be paying careful attention to who actually is accessing the services we put on, and who are we reaching and who are we not reaching. That technology can cut people out as much as it can include people. And so as we move into a post-pandemic world, it's really important that as careers professionals, we're keeping an eye on the ball when we're using technology around who is able to make use of the services that we're putting forward and who isn't, so that our efforts to include people aren't cutting out others on the side, that we're not robbing Peter to feed Paul, as the old expression goes. So yeah, firstly, enabling access. Secondly, preserving choice. I think it's one of the things that technology really stands for, is or particularly digital technology as we've known it over the last 20 to 30 years, is that technology allows people to make choices about how they want to access information. I can pick up my smartphone and allow me to access information using what browser I want, using what websites I like, following the people I want to on social media channels. It gives me lots of choice about how I access things. And some of these choices are quite personal and are quite ethical in nature. There may be people in this room who have strong views about which tech organizations they do or don't feel happy doing business with, because of the tax policies of various large tech companies, for example. These are personal ethical positions. And we also have our preferences around what technology we make use of. You may have your views about whether you like using Zoom over Teams, or like you're more of a Jitsi person, or whatever it may be. I think, therefore, it's really important when we are trying to engage the people that we're working with around their careers, that we're giving them choices around what technology they're making use of. In some ways, with technology, we're sort of stepping into somebody else's world and somebody else's ecosystem. And so I think it's really important that we're offering them that choice around what tools they feel comfortable with and in what ways do they want to be using them. So it can be, I think, can sometimes be frustrating for careers clients when career services put up like a one-size-fits-all. Yes, we do things using Zoom, or we do things using Teams, and that personal choice is removed from them around what they feel comfortable with and how they want to be using technology. Secondly, I think there are key issues then about preserving choice. Also, establishing boundaries, which I think for a careers professional, as we kind of move off into the Wild West, as it were, of what careers practice could look like. I think this notion of boundaries, I think, is really important for us to be thinking about what our professionalism is, where it starts, where it finishes, and sort of how we are how we're managing ourselves and managing our own time. As somebody who delivers in a face-to-face world, working out what our time looks like of when the working day starts and finishes is really straightforward. For anybody who remembers workplaces before email, which I just about do, have that sort of sense of, well, you left work behind in the office, you left the physical office, and then you were no longer at work in the same sort of way. But as digital technology increases, our access to work also increases, and it gives us interesting questions around the boundaries that we face. I think this could be particularly pertinent if we're looking to start engaging with career clients in digital spaces, particularly their own digital spaces. So if we're, for example, if we're involved in encouraging, let's say, university students to start using online platforms such as Twitter and LinkedIn, that very naturally leads into us, as careers professionals, potentially following those individuals. If we sort of advocate to a student to connect with people that might be able to help with their career, then often I think career professionals feel beholden on them to actually, if somebody then asks to be connected with them, to do just that sort of a thing. But as we evolve in these sorts of practices, as our position as careers professionals moves into that sort of world of social media and potentially connecting with people that we work with, I think it raises particular questions around where our boundaries are, what our responsibilities are to things that we might see online, conversations being had, attitudes being shared. Where does our role as a careers professional who is coaching and supporting somebody in their career start, and where does it finish? How will we respond to people we're supporting, sending us messages at the weekend or late at night around their careers? If somebody's, we often live in an instant world, and so as our digital lines sort of get blurred, it become more confusing to think about, well, what actually are the boundaries of our work? Where's our position in this ecosystem? What's their position in the ecosystem? And how would I mediate it? And as ever, as a careers professional, that sort of negotiation and that sort of contracting in a broader sense is really important, so that when we're connecting and developing relationships with career clients online, we're being clear with them around how we're managing that relationship, about and when we will or won't respond to them, about what we may or may not do with things that we conversations that we see being had. As boundaries become more blurred in these digital spaces, clarity around professional identity becomes more important, and careers professionals having spaces where they can share practice, where they can discuss difficult issues, where they can talk through, like, what should you do if you've connected with if you've been invited into a group where careers is being discussed and you see something happening which you would consider to be misogynistic in some manner. What is your responsibility to the career clients you're working with? What is your role, and what is, how should you be responding in that situation from a professional point of view? So, establishing boundaries. I think as with any of these things, I don't think there are straightforward answers, but I think these are the key questions that we need to be grappling with as a sector. And then lastly but not least, informing and protecting people. I think this particularly applies to how we might work in a way that encourages people to make more use of digital technology for themselves in their own careers. So if we're going to do things like encourage young people to get on LinkedIn, start getting involved with Twitter, setting up a professional Twitter account, maybe set up their own blog, maybe start a YouTube channel, maybe if they're in their sort of in lots of tech careers and lots of arts-based careers, having a digital presence and a digital portfolio which is searchable and can be found, then there are that can throw up real issues around what our role is in informing them and protecting them of the connected world that they're part of. I think we've all come across sort of horror stories about people being disadvantaged in their careers because of things that they've said online. I think we're sort of, as career professionals, we've heard that story before about encourage people to think through issues to do with how they're presenting themselves online. But I think increasingly, particularly through my own research into how students use social media, there are, I think I'm seeing a couple of other issues coming up which are related to that, which are just important for us to think through around how do we inform people and how do we protect them online. The first is if we're encouraging people to think about presenting a professional demeanor online, it could be really important that we're clear with people what professional does or doesn't mean, or how it's socially constructed by different groups at different points in time. Often people can just take that on as well. I need to be respectable. If there's for example, if there are pictures of the internet of me with a glass of wine, then maybe I'm not going to get my next job. And I think for anybody who's been involved in recruitment, or I think most people involved in recruitment will tell you that they've got a lot more things to worry about than whether the person they've hired has ever been found near a glass of wine before. But these sorts of stories can end up getting blurred in the minds of the very people we're trying to support. And so I think we need to be careful when we're informing people that we're giving them a clear view about how various actions might be seen online, but one that doesn't cut away from their authenticity and doesn't cut away from their various identities. We can sometimes give the impression that it's only your career that matters, and so make sure there's a really clean career version of yourself online, which can cut away from other parts of young people's or anybody's identities which are important, to do with their political identities, maybe their religious identities, maybe their ethnic backgrounds, and other things that make them who they are, that they feel they need to suppress in the name of being professional or being employable. The other side of things is that the internet can be potentially a difficult place, particularly for somebody who isn't aware of things, and that just because you're on somewhere like Twitter or LinkedIn and you're trying to act professionally, particularly if you're a young person, that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't issues of threat that you might be facing. So I've worked with students who have been very explicitly approached by people who have offered them jobs, and further down the line it turned out what they were trying to do was to recruit them onto a pyramid scheme or recruit them into a 0-hour contract. And because that happened in a digital space, it's very difficult for that student to go, well, I just kind of had this person I was connecting with, I didn't really know who they were. It's a lot easier for the person making that advance to do it and to get away with it, and it leaves the young person who was left quite searchable by LinkedIn with little sort of response for how they would defend themselves. Sometimes this can even go further. I've seen examples of particularly female students who have had improper approaches on sites such as LinkedIn, and because they were there for their career and they wanted to make a good impression to somebody, they ended up going further, at least in a conversation, than they would have done if somebody had sent them the same set of messages on Facebook. So we need to be clear that when we're equipping people to be involved in the digital world, that we're not just that we're clear about the messages and the ideas that we're giving them and how we're protecting them from some of the negative aspects about what can happen online. So I'm edging up to my 20 minutes. I hope you found that interesting. I mean, nothing there is a straightforward answer. I'm not going to tell people exactly what they should be doing with their practice, but I just wanted to, I think it's important that we're clear what the questions are that we should be asking as a sector, and working together around how we can work more critically around some of these key issues. That's all from me, Nikki. I'll hand back.
Oh, thank you so much, Tom. That's been really illuminating. And I have to say that I will forever, going forward, think of the future in career development as the Wild West of career practice. Thank you so much for that image. But of course, as you say, technology can both help and hinder us as we look at our practice and move forward. And some of the points that you've raised here have been super helpful in reflecting how we as professionals need to address this. One of the interesting comments that came up for me in the chat actually was that a number of people noted the fact that in terms of accessibility, many of them would never have come to TechFest had they had to travel. But the fact that they've actually been able to join in online has actually made these events more accessible. And I guess some people have been saying that they've never been to as much training as they have in the last few months because of the move to online. So that's, in terms of our own professional practice, something that we do need to note. And I noticed that Jan had actually put in the chat there as well that we've managed to save over 6 tons of carbon just by moving this conference online. And if you replicate that over and over, you know, there are some ethical issues there. Some people do very much think about the green agenda when they're choosing their careers, and thinking about those kind of green aspects are also super important. So some really useful things to be thinking about there. Okay, so we're now going to move seamlessly into a Q&A session, and what I've been doing here is trying to collate some questions as they've come along. I've also got a few up my sleeve just in case we run out. But the first question that was flagged was, just as a group, how do you think we as career practitioners can help support young women to go into tech? Now, in some ways we've covered that, but I think this is a broader issue, isn't it? It's not just about providing kind of information resources, but there's something else going on here that we could perhaps unpack. So I wonder if any of the panel members have got any ideas, and also if you've got any ideas in the chat, please put them in there as well. So okay,
if I could lean into that, there's been a lot of research done, and I think depending on the age range that you're talking about, if we're talking about under 18s, particularly with girls, it's important to remember the other influencers. So we may convince a girl, but if we don't convince her peers around her that it's good to get into tech. So sometimes I think it's worth remembering, don't just think about girls only events for tech, but have boys in the room so the boys see the women in tech, etc.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to involve parents. Parents are a big influencer on career choices. So those organizations that have made real inroads into helping young people do that have engaged the parents as well to help them understand the careers. The next thing that we have is there is the issue around role models. And I think it's really important. And one of the things that, you know, I put in the comments there, both TechSheCan and Institute of Coding, when we talk about role models, it's not just the people at the top of the pyramid. You know, it's not just showing them Ada Lovelace and Sheryl Sandberg, all right? This is about getting them, and we've seen some great work where sometimes don't even get somebody who's top manager. Sometimes it's getting somebody coming back from a university course to come and talk about its next step role models that can make a real difference in that respect. And then just make use of all of the resources. So TechSheCan has resources, and they're also now working with STEM ambassadors to try and do that. So that role model people coming in and doing those sorts of things is very important that you can draw on. And then if you want lots of just really quick, easy video content, I shared it on the site, etc. But Institute of Coding did a whole campaign called Control Your Future that gave a range of people from a range of backgrounds talking about what it meant and why and what that mattered for tech. And there were some great resources. TechSheCan went about it thematically and in terms of role models. So it really brings to life for the girls and the boys. And I think somebody in the conversation said it's not just girls we need to attract. Absolutely. We know underrepresented groups. We know Black professionals are rarely going into tech, etc. So the more we normalize it and demystify it, there was another piece of research that women, when they were younger, didn't feel they had the confidence. They didn't think they were smart enough. They didn't. So there's a confidence issue, and helping them see the art of the possible, the range of routes, the range of roles, that this is not just sitting alongside some other sweaty boys in a basement looking at a screen. There is much more to tech than that.
That's interesting, because I was going to do a follow-up question. I don't know whether it would be a controversial one, but I think maybe I'm not aware of the research which sits behind why girls aren't attracted to
There's
tech
a lot of
careers.
research. Yeah.
Is there a lot of research? So that would be really helpful if you're able to flag any of that for us. So
I would again go, so have a look at Tech She Can. Tech She Can was formed on the back of research that went in to look at the reasons why young women weren't going into tech. We've also published research. HP did some research with the Fawcett Society. So we do map a lot of the research. And so some of the things we're talking about are those influencers, the role models, the confidence, the parents' influence in those things, the clear careers information, the links into universities. And then that's what's been good news as well. Institute of Coding did a lot of research to figure out what are they saying and doing that are putting people off when they think about a course in terms of going on to university to do that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Debbie. And I'll certainly be looking at that research evidence. It does sound like a really good source to help us understand what the issues are here. So great. And I wonder if any of the other panel members would like to have a say on this question.
Yeah, so sorry, my camera's not working for some reason, so you'll just have to have my picture. So I haven't just disappeared off the screen, but I think it's one of the things Debbie touched on is that it's the role models. So I think you talked about, sort of not just sort of Sheryl Sandberg and, Rana El-Kaloubi is another one that comes to mind. But if I think about the Women Tech Network and events like that, what you see is young women who are just starting out, but who are truly showing themselves up to be role models. I mean, I was speaking to a young woman via LinkedIn who is, she's in Zambia, and she's just started up her own tech company, coding, etc. And she's in the way, she can't be any more than about 25. So it's how do we kind of bring in these younger women who maybe will appear more sort of reachable and attainable to tell their stories, because I think the storytelling is the thing that really grips people. So it's about how can we get that, I think, more into the education system would be a really good sort of question to ask back, actually.
Yeah, okay. I don't know whether any of our colleagues in the chat have got any ideas for that, or even Tom, have you got an answer for that? I saw you smiling there. No. Okay. Has anybody else got any kind of points they'd like to make before I move on to the next question?
No, I think just to add to what Debbie said again as well is, and I sort of touched on it in my talk, is that I think it's really important that when we advocate either inclusion for women, it's not at the detriment of boys and men, that we equally need to be encouraging, because by encouraging both, we want to be looking to have collaborative, cohesive working environments. That's the key thing, isn't it? It's about a real sense of connection and community. So again, it's that how do you have those conversations without feeling like you're excluding? Because again, inclusion is about not excluding. So it's about how can you make sure people feel, everybody feels included in that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Really important point there. Okay, I've got another question then. So this is so Tom doesn't get let off the hook here. It's okay, you can thank me later. What are the greatest challenges in promoting ethical use of digital technology across the career development sector?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think rather than looking at issues, again, I think the biggest challenges we face are around understanding impact and understanding how things play out in the medium term. So I think it's an area where research is really vital around what difference digital technology is making. So I'm involved in a bit of research at the moment, looking at how HE careers practitioners have been using digital technology over the pandemic, and just trying to think about what that would mean for the post-pandemic world. And we don't know what that world is going to look like. And we don't know what impact has been had on the young people that have been supported through universities over the last 12 months, because how could you, because it's still happening. And And so I think the need for really robust research so that we can see the impact that tools are having is really important as we move forward. And that creates a difficult space where practice can often accelerate quicker than we have chances to really reflect on stuff and really think from a sector around what the research is actually saying. So I think that'll be my big thing, is that it is an area where we need small scale research, we need large scale research, we need practitioners to be able to share their experiences, and we need to be talking to people who are receiving services and asking them really personal questions around what it's like, what the benefits and what the difficulties are of receiving a digital career service.
Right, thanks for that, Tom. So what you're saying there is it needs to be research-informed practice, and a really important point that you're making there. Then, thank you. And what about Debbie or Joe? Have you got something you'd like to add in terms of ethics and how we can encourage, the sector to engage more so in the issues around ethical use of technology?
I think I come at it again from the sort of employment perspective. I think the more that we're encouraging underrepresented groups to become involved in the creation of tech, the more likely we are to be seeing better use of data, more effective, wider use of data. And I think it's, from a careers perspective, it is about educating yourself. It is a fast-moving field, and I think Thomas was very good at showing and making us aware of we are chasing a fast-moving target, and it is that willingness to just keep learning. And also, you work with young people, have them help look up and think those things. I think sometimes it's not just about protecting our students, but educating our young people and the clients that we work with to learn to ask the right questions. So, there's always going to be a different way that things, unethical practice starts coming through. If we start educating those we work with of the value of their data, of the importance of their own personal data, I think we help them become allies in helping us make sure that they're able to do so.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I just wanted to add, actually, thinking about it from the point of view of having a 16-year-old boy around and seeing the technology they use, and you really don't know what they're actually looking at. And I heard a really good point made by somebody on a podcast recently, is that actually I think there's a place for education to start looking at how they talk to young people about what they're doing with technology, how they're using it, what it means to have a social profile, the impact of that, and actually by signing up to all these things, what they're actually doing with their data. So, how do we get them more educated to understand that, they can make themselves quite vulnerable, they can make themselves quite open. And I think, Thomas, there's a really good point you made about your profile online. So companies inevitably will look to see what you've got online. It's a thing you do when you apply for a job. Everybody looks at you on LinkedIn. So it's that thing of really thinking about what do you do online that will then impact you as you go forward in your future. And I think it has to start in education.
But remember as well, I absolutely agree with it, but remember they're teenagers.
Yes.
If all we focus on is how it's bad and it's risky and the bad things that can happen, we've just made it 50% sexier for kids, us saying no, no, no. So I think, Thomas, both you and Joe are right. It's about giving them the balance message, show them the good things, getting it right, doing this these ways. This is how professional people do things online, etc., as well as the risk. Give them the whole picture and help model it with them. I worry when I go into schools and only hear the scaremongering. In the same way that we know that doesn't work on sex education, drugs education, or anything else. We have to equip them with the full picture of facts. Otherwise, if we create a falsely, wholly terrifying picture, they'll find a hole in it and then disbelieve everything we said. So I think it's about showing that balanced view to our cynical young people when we're trying to do that and do that with them.
And that's really good, Deb. Sorry, just Nikki, to interrupt.
No,
but I agree with you, Debbie, because I'm all about spinning it to a positive message rather than it being so, that I'm sort of saying this out loud, but I totally agree with you. How can we make it a positive message rather than a negative one for them? So like you say, they just then want it more.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting the way this conversation is going, actually, because one of the reasons I got very interested in technology in the first place was observing one of my children who was playing an awful lot of computer games, and I got very worried about this, as we're told, you know, youngsters shouldn't be doing this all the while. But when I started to ask him about what he was doing, he began talking to me about transferable skills. In effect, he was doing this, he was able to do that.
It's the conversations, yeah, Nikki, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, you know, so trying to understand what young people are interacting with online, and trying to tease out, well, you know, what of that is really helpful, what may be not so helpful, but helping them think about how that can transfer into, you know, the workplace in later life, and using it as something they can sell rather than something to be ashamed of, I think is quite important. Okay, so what I've got from that question as well has been not just talk to kids about how they're using tech, but also the very important point that we need to make sure that there's research that we're using to inform our career development practitioners, both through initial training, but also through the continuing professional development programs that are in place. And it's great that the CDI is engaging strongly with this, so that, you know, there is a program of digital bites, which are like little mini bits of learning around tech, but also events like this. So, you know, we just need to get more and more people engaging in the conversation, I think. Okay, now I've got one last question. Let me find it. So this was a question posted in the chat as well, and it was around the non-traditional roles that might be around, and how we can help young people understand that technology is actually embedded in lots of different things, not just jobs that have technology in the title, but that actually technology is a fundamental way of working nowadays. And I wondered whether you might have an answer to that, any of you.
When I used to run an organization called Apps for Good, we were doing surveys, before and after surveys, to try and look at impact, and asking questions of, you know, are you interested in a career in tech? And getting very strange responses. And it's only when we went back to ask the question, unpacking for kids, you know, we're of a generation that tech is a thing. For kids, it's ubiquitous. And so really it's about sort of surfacing the ways in which, and that is why I loved the materials that Tech She Can did, is because they've chosen broad topic areas. And one of my favorite was holidays. And they went through a bunch of holidays and celebrations around it, and all of the tech jobs that were feeding into this. And they looked at the film industry. And I think it's that voyage of experience of understanding how much this now touches on, because I think, and, you know, when the studies that are coming through, it is the jobs that don't need tech skills is diminishing very quickly. It's why something like Future.Now has arisen, because they're realizing in the existing workforce, there are a number of people who are going to find themselves at risk within their jobs from jobs we wouldn't see as tech roles because they don't have the tech skills. And so, and the other thing our employers are realizing is the number of opportunities within their workforce of having people retrain from one area into another. So, for example, there was a BT story of a woman who had headed up their call centers for 10 years, retrained and became part of the product design team for chatbots. So this is a woman who went from at risk of being displaced by tech to be in a tech role, to make an even better product, because who would know better for a chatbot than someone who had run call centers? So I think it's about surfacing those very practical examples to sort of bring that to life for everyone. But it is more a sense of every job is going to need tech skills, and then every industry has tech roles. It's why we have such reach across industries as the Tech Talent Charter.
Okay, thank you for that. What about you, Tom or Joe? Have you got an answer that you want to put forward there?
I just thought it was really interesting. I've just finished reading a book called Girl Decoded by an amazing woman called Rana El Kaloubi, who heads up a company called, oh no, I've got the name. Probably Effectiva. Sorry, that went out of my head for a minute. That's all about emotional intelligence. So how they're putting emotional intelligence into technology, into artificial intelligence. And I think what was really interesting was she talked about the workplace, and Debbie mentioned about certain roles being displaced, is that alongside the technology, there's also the need to understand it from an emotional and a human perspective. So I think, you know, there's going to be the need for very sort of technically focused roles, but also the need to understand to be able to do jobs that have not only technology in them, but aren't necessarily technical, but also the human element. You know, technology cannot replace understanding humans like we understand humans. And so I think there's a really interesting area there as well.
Can I lead in and say the industry realizes this, and they're starting to see, you're going to find pure engineering programming roles are not going to vanish, but they're not going to continue to expand in the way that they have up until now because of machine learning and things like that. But roles that have the human aspect are growing. And the one thing I would also say that I hear coming out again and again from the employers and also people who get into tech, there are very, very few roles in tech now that are in isolation. Success in tech now relies on the emotional intelligence, the team working skills, the learning skills. So a lot of the things that young people will say, oh, I don't want to go into that because I want to work with people and things, those skills go to work. All right. The tech role, as it used to be, that old stereotype, is no longer the dominant, the majority within the role. Tech is hungry for people who are creative, artistic, people-focused, leaders, managers, project owners, etc. It is a very, very wide spectrum.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Tom, is there anything you want to add here? No, he's nodding.
No. My colleagues have answered very expertly. I've nothing to throw in extra.
Okay, well, I suppose my reflection on this was that I went to a presentation about a year or so ago by a local enterprise partnership, and one of the things that stood out for me was a presentation by somebody on farming and the role of technology in farming, and actually your combine harvesters now are all kind of linked to sat navs and they're all programmed, and it was just absolutely fascinating. So
agri-tech is growing. I mentored somebody up until a few months ago. There's a pair of twin young women that started when they were like 17 who have their own agri-tech business. They work out of Ireland, right, and have devised and are doing this sort of hardcore engineering piece. And so, yeah, there is no industry that tech is not reaching into these days, and women can have a role there.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you. And all sorts of stuff going on in the chat about esports and everything. So I think this has been a wonderful panel. Thank you all so much for your contributions, and of course everybody that's been listening in and flagging all these resources and things. It's been great. And I guess for me the notion of a happy-thon kind of summarizes at the moment. So I'm going to hand it over to Jan now, who wants to say a few words, but thank you everybody for participating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nikki.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Nikki, for chairing the session, and our great 3 panelists this afternoon. I think I felt a great deal of passion in all of our speakers and a great energy coming through, and I think the discussion actually after the inputs was at least as valuable as the inputs. It was really great, so thank you to everybody for taking part. I'm really here to do a bit of a summing up for today. This is the last formal session of the TechFest conference. Thank you to 254 people that signed up to attend the 2 days. I hope you have enjoyed it. I think I almost feel, having attended lots of sessions, that we're just scratching the surface somehow on this tech issue, aren't we? We're just really starting to get to grips with some of the really important issues. I thought the session this morning around artificial intelligence and careers advice was really exciting. I could just listen to that again as a recording because I'm sure there were things I missed in there, but it was really interesting to learn how, in fact, there's nothing to worry about here in the tech, in the sense that digital tools have the potential to for scale, but they can't replace the human careers advisor. So there's no need for us to worry there, but they can really help us to do our jobs better, which is a lot of the message of what the CDI is about in terms of helping people to develop their own professional development skills and practice. So thank you very much for everybody who's taken part so far. Just a few messages from me as part of that wrap up. We will be sending out the ubiquitous evaluation form. It's been designed with the help of Nikki Moore, who's just chaired the last session, and it really is easy to complete, but it's important for us to get your feedback on events like this so we can plan future courses and conferences that will meet your own professional development needs. So we'll send that out as a link in chat, but we'll also do a letter to everyone who's been a delegate and send you it in an email as well. If you've missed any of the sessions, all the recordings will be on the website by the end of the week, I hope. We'll just tidy them up, sort of the beginnings and the ends, but make them as short and concise as possible. But they will be there for you to download, and we'll send you a link as well through the delegate email system. Please do keep tweeting hashtag CDI TechFest and tell everybody else what you thought about the event and things that you found useful. And just finally, to wrap up, although we finished the formal bit of the conference, there's still one really important session to go, and that's our live social tables. Now, it's the first time we've done this, but when you leave this session, you'll find that we've got 5 different tables set up, and we want everybody to find one that fits their needs most. So we've got a social discussion table for FE-based practitioners. We've got another one for school-based practitioners, a third one for people who are focused particularly on HE, another one for people working with students, and lastly, a discussion table for freelance practitioners and coaches. And the idea is that give you an opportunity to talk about what you've learned and put it into action, what you're going to do next after the conference. And please do feel free to move between the tables. If you don't want to be corralled into a particular group, please do take the opportunity to move out from there. But it's a real opportunity for discussion, to catch up on the conference, talk about what you've liked, what you'd like more of, and how you're going to put what you've learned into action. So finally for me, thank you. This is the end of this session. Please do feel to have a break for 15-20 minutes, but then we've got the social tables there for you to join. And in my final sentences, I just want to say a huge thank you to Michael and Joanne and Dan, who've been managing all the tech behind the conference scene most expertly. I think I said at the beginning of the conference in my introduction yesterday morning that an online conference is different. You have to reimagine it as we're all sat here in our homes and in our home office spaces. But I think the platform does give a good opportunity for lots of dynamic networking and the opportunity to meet up with other people and, of course, to meet our great exhibitors. So thank you most of all to all of you for taking part. And we hope we'll see you at future events. But please do disappear altogether yet. The open live social tables will take place from about 3:10 onwards. So thank you very much from me, and we'll see you again later. Bye.